6 months after I buried my husband, my mother drove 3 hours in the rain to stand on my front porch. She had never done that before. Dorothy Hargrove did not show up anywhere uninvited. She only moved toward things that had something to offer her. I watched her on the doorbell camera. She stood there in her camel coat, a grocery bag on the porch step beside her, rosary beads wrapped around her other hand. She looked smaller than I remembered. She pressed the bell a second time. A third. Then she looked directly into the camera lens and said, "Maya, I know you're home. Please, we need to talk." I set the phone face down on my kitchen counter and walked away. My name is Maya Donovan. I was 36 years old when my husband Ethan died. I was 37 when I understood that the deepest loss was not the man I had buried. It was the family I had already been grieving for years without ever giving myself permission to call it that. Ethan died on a Saturday night in March. I called my mother from the emergency room floor with my knees on cold linoleum and his name in my mouth like a prayer with no destination. She picked up. She listened. And then she said, in the same voice she used for grocery lists, "We cannot come tonight, Maya. Caleb just made his announcement. There are people here." There were always people there. Before I go any further, if this kind of story stays with you, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. I genuinely want to know. 6 months later, my mother came back to my door. She did not come for me. She came for the money. And what happened next was the only thing she never planned for. Before I tell you how everything broke, let me tell you what we had. Because the magnitude of what my family chose to walk away from matters. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, the eldest daughter of Raymond and Dorothy Hargrove. My father coached high school football. My mother chaired the neighborhood HOA, ran the church outreach committee, and organized every family gathering with the precision of a stage director who had never quite forgiven her audience for not applauding loud enough. I was the quiet one, good grades, stayed out of the way. My brother Caleb was 3 years younger, louder, and the undisputed center of gravity in our household. He played varsity baseball. He got into the right kind of trouble. He could walk into a room and make my mother laugh so hard she had to set down her coffee. I paid my way through college with scholarships and 2 part-time jobs. Caleb received a monthly check from our parents until he was 27. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it because context is everything. Some families have a hierarchy of love, and I had spent my childhood near the bottom of it without ever letting myself say so out loud. I moved to Savannah at 24 for a teaching position at Monroe Academy, a small private school near Forsyth Park. I taught high school art. I loved it the way you love something that fits you at a molecular level, the smell of oil paint in the morning, students discovering what their hands were capable of, the surprising peace of a room full of teenagers creating something together. I met Ethan Donovan on a Thursday afternoon in October at a coffee shop on Broughton Street. He was at the table next to mine, on the phone with his business partner, getting increasingly frustrated trying to describe what was wrong with a logo mock-up. I finally looked up from my sketchbook and said, without thinking, "The kerning is off. That is why it looks unbalanced." He lowered the phone, stared at me. "You can see that from over there? You are holding the screen at an angle. The letter spacing is uneven on the right side." 3 seconds of silence. He told his partner he would call back. He slid his laptop to my table. I fixed the kerning in 4 minutes. He bought me coffee. We talked until the cafe turned its sign. That was Ethan. He was 30 years old, a software developer running a productivity startup for small businesses, with a laugh that started somewhere in his shoulders before it reached his face. He called me the next morning and said, "I showed my partner the fixed logo. He thinks I redesigned it. Should I tell him?" I said yes. He said, "Fair. Can I take you to dinner instead?" We married 2 years later. A small ceremony in Forsyth Park with 60 guests, paper lanterns I designed myself, and music that lasted until the neighbors on the adjacent path stopped to listen. My parents attended. My mother said the flowers were understated. My father shook Ethan's hand and said, "Take care of her." They left before the first dance. Ethan noticed things like that. He had a particular intelligence for what people tried to keep invisible. 3 months after our wedding, he came to find me in the kitchen while I was on the phone with my mother, nodding through a 15-minute report on Caleb's new apartment and his latest business idea. When I hung up, Ethan leaned against the counter and said, "She did not ask how you were once, in 15 full minutes." "She is distracted," I said. He nodded the way he did when he thought I was wrong, but loved me too much to push. 4 years in, his startup was acquired by a mid-sized tech firm in Atlanta. We bought a house in the Victorian district. We talked about children. We planned a trip to Portugal that kept getting rescheduled for next spring. We had until March. I did not know that yet. The night our life ended started the way all ordinary nights do. Dinner. A movie we half-watched. Ethan asleep on the couch by 10. He woke at midnight with a sinus infection and got up to drive to the 24-hour pharmacy 3 miles away. He did not want to wake me. He did not want to wake me. He never came home. A police officer at your door at 1 in the morning has a particular posture. Anyone who has seen it knows exactly what it means before a single word is spoken. 2 officers. The one in front held his hat against his chest. His partner stood 1 step behind with her hands clasped together like she was trying to keep something contained. I had the door open before they knocked a second time. I do not know how I knew. I just knew. "Is this the residence of Ethan Donovan?" I told them it was. The officer took a breath. Ethan's car had been hit by a driver who ran a red light at 60 miles per hour on Abercorn Street. The impact was on the driver's side. Ethan was pronounced dead at the scene. The other driver was intoxicated. He walked away with a fractured collarbone. I do not have a continuous memory of what came next. I have pieces. The cold door frame under my palm. My neighbor Linda appearing in her bathrobe from across the street like she had been summoned. The sound of my own voice repeating "no, no, no" in a register I did not recognize as belonging to me. At some point, I was sitting on my front steps in the dark, and Linda was beside me with tea I did not drink. At 1:47 in the morning, I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. Behind her voice, the soft acoustic backdrop of a gathering winding down. Glasses being cleared. Voices settling into the comfortable frequency of a good evening. Maya. Warm with something that had been poured from a bottle. "It's late, baby." "Mom." I pressed my free hand flat against the step to feel something solid beneath me. "Ethan is dead. There was an accident. He is gone." Silence. Not the silence of shock. I want to be precise about this because it matters. Not a gasp. Not the sound of a chair being pushed back. A different kind of silence. Measured. The silence of a woman arranging what came next. "Oh, Maya." Her voice dropped into its formal register of concern. "That is terrible. I am so sorry. I need you to come. Mom, I need you here right now." The pause that followed lasted long enough for hope to form and dissolve. "Maya, I cannot leave right now. Caleb made his engagement announcement tonight, an hour ago. We have family in from Birmingham. People flew in for this. He is dead, Mom. I know. And I am heartbroken for you. But there is nothing I can do tonight that I cannot do Monday. Call your neighbor Linda, the one you are close with. I will come up early next week and we will handle the arrangements together." She told me to get some sleep. She said those words to me on the night my husband died on asphalt 3 miles from our home, driving to get cold medicine because he had not wanted to wake me up. She did not come Monday. She called Monday. 15 minutes. She mentioned she had looked up the funeral home number once and they had seemed professional, so that was something. I called my father. He said your mother told me, terrible thing, real sad, and asked whether the other driver carried liability insurance. I called Caleb. Voicemail. 2 hours later, a text, a thumbs up emoji. Below it, 15 seconds later. Sorry, meant to send that to someone else. So sorry about Ethan. Hang tight. Hang tight. I kept those words in my head for weeks, the way you keep a stone in your shoe. Constant, small, impossible to ignore. I planned the funeral without them. 64 people signed the guest book. Marcus handled the reception. Linda organized the flowers. Precious flew in from Chicago and slept on my couch for 9 days. My colleagues from Monroe Academy came in shifts. Ethan's pastor drove to my house at 6 the morning after with coffee and offered to handle every detail. The 3 seats in the front row I had reserved for my parents and my brother remained empty for the entire service. My father called Thursday. We were going to come, but your mother felt it might be too emotional for her. She thought it was better to wait until things settled. I said nothing. You understand, he said. It was not a question. He had spent 40 years making sure nothing became a question. I hung up, sat in the chair by the window where Ethan used to read, and for the first time in 36 years I stopped pretending it was fine. Because something had shifted. Something without a name, but permanent. Quiet the way geological things are quiet. And that shift was about to cost my family everything they had spent decades taking for granted. There is a quality to a house after a funeral that no one prepares you for. Everything is exactly where it was. Everything is completely wrong. Ethan's coffee mug was still on its hook by the machine. His running shoes were still by the back door, laces loosely tied the way he always left them. His novel was face down on the nightstand at the page he would never turn. I did not move any of it. What I moved, 3 days after the service, was a small metal box I found on the high shelf at the back of the closet behind his winter coats. But I will get to that. First, I need to tell you about the afternoon. Precious cracked open what I had been unable to look at directly. She had been with me for 9 days. On the last morning before her flight back to Chicago, we sat at the kitchen table with coffee and she looked at me across the rim of her mug and said, "Maya, tell me what happened with your family." I told her. All of it. The call at 1:47. My mother's voice with the party in the background. My father and his question about liability insurance. Caleb's accidental thumbs up. The empty front row with the rain-damp seat cushions. Precious listened without a word. When I finished, she set her mug down with the particular deliberateness of someone organizing their response carefully. They didn't come to the funeral. No. They were at a party. An engagement announcement. Caleb's. Yes. A moment of quiet. Do they know 64 people were there? That Marcus organized the whole thing? That you delivered that eulogy alone, in front of everyone without a single member of your own blood in the room? I don't think they've asked. She nodded once and said nothing more. She did not need to. I could feel the weight of what she was not saying settling between us like a change in weather. After she left for the airport, I went to the closet to find Ethan's good wool overcoat. I wanted to hold it. I know what that sounds like, and I do not apologize for it. Grief makes you want whatever the person left behind that your hands can still reach. That was when I found the box. It was unremarkable. Metal. Gray. Locked with a combination I did not know. The kind of thing that could sit on a shelf for a decade before anyone thought to ask about it. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat across from it for a long time. Then I called Marcus. He came over that evening, set the box on the table between us and said, "I know what that is." I waited. Ethan talked to me about this about 8 months ago. He made me promise not to say anything because he did not want you to worry. He was working through some things, making sure you were covered. Covered from what? Marcus was quiet for a moment. His uncle's wife lost everything after a sudden death. No documents, no plan. 2 years of fighting creditors. Ethan watched that when he was 19, and it never left him. He slid a napkin across the table with a name on it. You need to call his lawyer. David Park. I have his number. David Park's office was on a quiet downtown street above a bookstore that made the whole stairwell smell like old paper. He was soft-spoken, mid-40s, with reading glasses he did not wear so much as carry. He set a thick folder on his desk before I had removed my coat. Ethan came to me 8 months before the accident, he said. He was very thorough. I did not know. He intended it that way. He pushed the folder across the desk. He asked me to give you this first, before we go over anything else. On top of the folder, a sealed envelope in Ethan's angular handwriting. My name. Nothing else. David said he would get water and left the room. I held the envelope for a long time. Then I opened it. And what I read inside changed every decision I would make for the next 6 months. The letter was 4 pages. Ethan's handwriting, that left-leaning angular script I used to tease him about because it looked like every letter was leaning into the wind. I read it twice in David Park's office. Then I folded it and put it in my coat pocket. Close. I will not share what it says. That letter belongs to the two of us and to the space between us that the living have no claim to enter. But I will tell you what it meant. It meant he had known. Not that he was going to die. He did not know that. But he had seen something about my life that I had spent years refusing to see directly. He had watched my mother treat my wedding like an obligation she was tolerating. He had watched my father's eyes dim whenever the conversation turned to me. He had watched Caleb's name ignite something in my mother's face that my name had never once produced. And he had done something about it. Quietly, without drama, out of love. David explained it plainly. Ethan had purchased a life insurance policy 18 months before the accident, $2.5 million. I was the sole beneficiary with language that explicitly excluded all other family members from any claim. He had also retained an equity stake in his company from the acquisition deal, with a contractual deferred payment clause tied to performance milestones. That payment had cleared 4 weeks after his death. Total estate value, $3,400,000. I stared at the number on the page. It did not feel like a number. It felt like a language I did not speak yet. He was meticulous, David said. The estate structure means these funds are entirely at your discretion. No family member has any legal standing to challenge the distribution. He was very explicit about that clause. He wrote it in specifically. Yes. He told me exactly why. I thought about those Sunday evenings, the closed study door, the quiet hour I had assumed was work. He had not been working. He had been building a wall between me and the worst version of a future he could imagine, one where he was gone and I was alone, and the people who were supposed to help me didn't. He had been building that wall for me. I sat in my car for 40 minutes after the meeting. Engine off. Rain on the windshield. Doing the math not of the money, but of the years. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. She had heard something through her cousin's network about a fund being established in Ethan's name. She wanted to know if that was true. And then the sentence that made everything click into final, irreversible focus. Caleb has some business experience. I'm sure he would want to be involved. Not one word about the funeral. Not one word about how I was doing. Not one reference to grief or loss or the fact that I had buried my husband 9 days ago without a single member of my birth family present. Just Caleb has business experience. I set the phone on the seat and looked out the rain-blurred window for a long time. And something inside me that had been suspended for weeks, something fragile and still and patient, finished breaking. Not the desperate, hollow breaking of the first hours. This was different. Clean. Precise. The way a bone completes a fracture that started weeks earlier. The sound of a final thing finally doing what it was always going to do. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table where Ethan used to do his Sunday planning, I opened my sketchbook for the first time since March, and I started drawing. Not a project, not a logo, just lines and shapes and the beginning of something I could not yet name. I did not have a plan, but I had something more powerful than a plan. I had clarity, and for the first time since the night he died, I had purpose. My mother would learn what I built with that purpose, but not in the way she was imagining, not even close. The first thing I did with clarity was use it to say no. And that single word, spoken quietly into a family group chat at 9 on a Tuesday morning, changed the architecture of my entire life. I typed, "I need time and space. Please do not contact me while I figure out what comes next. I will reach out when I am ready." My mother responded within 2 minutes. "What does that mean? You cannot just disappear. We are your family." My father said nothing. Caleb sent a gif of a cartoon dog looking confused. I blocked all 3 numbers. I archived the group chat. I set my voicemail to capacity so nothing could leave a message. Then I made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Lorraine Webb, whose office was on a quiet street near the Savannah waterfront, and I kept that appointment every Thursday for the next 8 months without missing once. Dr. Webb did not tell me what to do. That surprised me. I had expected frameworks, instructions, a map. Instead, she asked questions and then waited with genuine patience for as long as the answer needed to arrive. In our second session, she asked, "When was the last time someone in your birth family asked what you needed and then actually provided it?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. The silence in that room lasted long enough that I became aware of the clock on the wall. "Take your time," she said. I could not answer that session or the next. The answer was there, but it was under too many years of weight to lift all at once. 3 weeks after the funeral, I went back to teaching. My students at Monroe Academy did not know what to say, and most of them correctly chose to say nothing, which was exactly right. I taught with the windows open and the lights on, and I let oil paint do what it does to a person who needs to feel something containable. One of my students, a junior named Desmond who rarely spoke and made extraordinary charcoal portraits, left a sketch on my desk one morning without a word. It was a drawing of a woman looking out a window, and at the bottom he had written in small block letters, "She is not waiting, she is deciding." I kept it. I have it framed on my wall now, and I look at it every morning. In the evenings, I worked on the idea that had begun as shapes in a sketchbook. Ethan had come to me because of design, and in 6 years of marriage, I had quietly helped a dozen of his friends' businesses from the kitchen table, always for free, always informally. A logo here, a brand identity there, a website that looked intentional rather than panicked. I decided to formalize it. A design and branding studio. Small, deliberate, mine. I named it Bright Frame Studio. Within 6 weeks, I had 4 clients from referrals alone. Marcus brought me 3 businesses from his network. Linda's son hired me for his landscaping company rebrand. A woman from my neighborhood came to me after seeing the Monroe Academy event posters I had redesigned. Word moved through Savannah the way it always does, which is to say, quietly, consistently, and through every conversation that happens on a back porch over sweet tea. By the 3rd month, I had a waiting list. I kept teaching. I could afford not to. But Ethan had told me once that the most dangerous thing a person could do was stop being useful to people outside their own interior life, and I believed him enough to hold on to the classroom. I was not healed. That word does not apply to this kind of loss, and I will not pretend otherwise. But I was anchored. I was pointing in a direction. My mother knew none of this yet. But Savannah did. And Savannah talks. And somewhere in the chain of church acquaintances and neighborhood connections that runs between that city and Augusta, a name was being mentioned in the same breath as a foundation, a studio, and a woman building something from the ground up alone. The story was already traveling, My mother just did not know yet that she was in it. I did not set out to become someone's headline. What I set out to do was survive. The headline arrived without my permission and turned out to be the most precise instrument of justice that I never once asked for. For months, I had been saying no to everything that required explanation. No to Thanksgiving. No to Christmas. No to the family group chat that someone kept re-adding me to every few weeks. No to a cousin who called in January to tell me my mother was worried. No to the story my family had been quietly circulating in, which I was the fragile one, and they were the helpless, concerned ones doing their best. I said no to all of it without anger, because anger requires a kind of engagement I had stopped having the energy for. I had learned from Dr. Webb that the opposite of engagement is not cruelty. It is simply choice. In March, exactly 1 year after Ethan died, a journalist named Camille Osei reached out through the Bright Frame Studio contact form. She wrote for a regional business publication called The Southern Current and was working on a feature about first-generation female entrepreneurs in Savannah. She had heard about the studio through a client referral. I almost did not respond. I sat with the message for 3 days. Then I called Precious in Chicago and read it to her. Precious said, "Maya, you are building something real. Tell the truth about it." I called Camille back. We met at the same coffee shop on Broughton Street where I had met Ethan 6 years earlier. I do not think that was coincidence. Grief has a geometry, and sometimes it pulls you back to the origin points without explaining why. Camille asked clean questions and wrote everything in a small notebook with a green cover. She asked about the studio, the clients, the design philosophy, how it started. I told her about Ethan, the kerning, the coffee, the startup, the acquisition, the providence of a man who had quietly spent his Sunday evenings building a wall around the woman he loved. She asked if his death had shaped the work in any specific way. I told her about the Donovan Fund. I had launched it 2 months earlier with David Park's guidance, a small endowment funded by a portion of Ethan's estate and designed to cover the invisible expenses that hit surviving spouses in the immediate aftermath of sudden accidental deaths. Funeral costs, first month of utilities, emergency child care, the expenses that feel manageable until they are not, and then they are not all at once. I had already helped 4 families in Chatham County. Camille put her pen down. You started a business and a charitable fund in the same year you lost your husband. He made sure I could, I said. I am just making sure it means something. She asked one more question before we wrapped. Did you have family support during this time? I thought about 1:47 in the morning, the sound of a party winding down in the background. Hang tight. The empty front row. I had extraordinary support, I said, from my community, from the people Ethan built his life with, from my neighbors and colleagues and friends. She wrote it down. The article ran in April, 4 pages. The headline, The Quiet Work, How One Savannah Designer Turned Loss into Legacy. In the 7th paragraph, 1 sentence. Donovan drew on her community for support in the months following the accident, noting that family circumstances left her navigating that period largely on her own. 12 words. The article was shared 2,000 times in the first week. A Savannah radio producer called. A national grief support organization reached out. A women's church group in Augusta, Georgia, posted it on their Facebook page with the caption, "This woman is extraordinary." Beneath the post, a comment from someone who recognized the last name. And in a house in Augusta, my mother opened her phone to a notification, and the version of the story she had spent months carefully constructing came face to face with the version the world had been writing without her. Those 2 stories could not both be true. One of them was about to collapse. My mother read the article 3 times. I know this because Caleb told me. What he described was a woman sitting at a kitchen table with reading glasses on and lips pressed into a hard line, scrolling back to the beginning again and again, as though the 3rd reading might change what it said. It did not change what it said. Caleb appeared at my door on a Saturday morning in May with a grocery bag and an expression calibrated somewhere between apologetic and casual. I watched him on the doorbell camera before I opened it. He looked different, smaller in the specific way that people look, when a version of themselves they had been comfortable with has simply stopped working. I opened the door but did not step aside. "I'm not here because Mom sent me," he said immediately. I waited. I mean, she partly did, but I also wanted to come on my own. The grocery bag rustled in his hand. "The article," he said. "It's everywhere. Our neighbor Carol posted it and tagged Mom by name, and now everyone from church has read it and—" He stopped. "It's not going well for her." "For whom?" I said. He shifted his weight. "Maya, I know I got it wrong. The text. The thumbs up. I had been drinking and I grabbed my phone, and I know that is not an excuse. I know. And the funeral. I should have been there. I should have come." "You should have," I said. "I am sorry." I looked at my brother, the favorite son, the one the sun rose and set for. He stood on my porch in the May heat looking genuinely, visibly uncomfortable for what I believe may have been the first time in his life. And I felt something I had not anticipated. Not anger, not satisfaction, not warmth either. Just a steady, clear-eyed calm. "Caleb, what does Mom want?" He glanced at the bag. "She wants to see you. She is hoping you would come to a family dinner. She thinks that if you are all in the same room, face to face." "No. Maya. No. And I want you to hear this clearly, not as something to repeat back to her, but for you. I am not withholding something that a good enough apology could unlock. There is no version of a family dinner that addresses what happened. My husband died. My family chose a party. That is the fact. Dinner does not change the fact." He was quiet. "You can come back when you want to talk about you and me," I said. "Not as her representative, just as my brother, but not today." I closed the door. He texted that night. One line, "I hear you. I am sorry. I will keep showing up." I read it. I did not reply. Back in Augusta, the architecture of my mother's social world had begun rearranging itself in the particular, devastating way that small communities do when trust quietly withdraws. No confrontations, no accusations. Just the slight delay before someone says hello. The invitation to the Spring Garden Committee lunch that did not arrive. The seat at the deacon meeting moved, for administrative reasons, to a different table. A woman named Ruth had printed the article and read a passage aloud at the Tuesday morning prayer group. My mother was not present. She heard about it by evening. She called her friend Patricia, who told her people were asking questions, not harsh ones. The quiet, lateral questions of women who have known each other for 30 years. Is everything okay with Dorothy and her daughter? We saw about Ethan. Was she at the service? She seems to have been through so much on her own. My mother's story, the one she had been maintaining for months, was built on me being fragile and withdrawn and resistant to comfort. But the article showed a woman running a studio, funding a charity, helping strangers bury their dead. The math of the story stopped adding up, and everyone could feel it. My mother called me every day for 2 weeks. Early mornings, late evenings, once at 11 at night. I let every call reach voicemail. I saved each one without listening. I was not punishing her. I was simply no longer available. And that distinction, quiet as it sounds, was the most powerful thing I had ever done in my life. 6 months after Ethan's funeral, the Donovan Fund held a small recognition dinner at a restaurant in downtown Savannah. It was not a gala, not a public event. Just 40 people in a private dining room, the 4 families the fund had helped that year, and the people who had made the work possible. My mother showed up anyway. I still do not know exactly how she found out. My best estimate is the Augusta Church Network, which connects to a Savannah women's group through a shared annual retreat, which connects to someone who had read the article and mentioned the fund's first event. In any case, she arrived at 7:15 in a light blue dress I had never seen before, chosen, I was certain, to read as approachable rather than aggressive. Caleb was with her, visibly unhappy to be there. My neighbor Linda found me near the back of the room and said quietly, "There are 2 people at the entrance without name cards." I excused myself from Denisha, a young woman whose husband's funeral the fund had covered in January, and walked to the entrance. My mother saw me coming and arranged her face into its warmest setting. I recognized it. I had been watching that expression my entire life. "Maya." Her arms opened slightly. "I just needed to be here. For you. For Ethan." I stopped 2 feet away and did not close the distance. "You were not invited." "I know that. But I am your mother and I have been trying for months and I just needed you to see me here. To see that I am showing up." I thought about Abercorn Street. I thought about 1:47 a.m. I thought about the empty front row in the rain. "You are 6 months late," I said. Her composure cracked along one edge, just slightly, but I saw it. "Tell me what you want from me. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to leave, without causing a scene, because there are people in this room who have lost someone, and they came here tonight to honor that loss, and I will not allow this evening to become about something else." Caleb touched her arm. "Mom, we should go." She held my gaze. Her eyes were wet. Real or rehearsed, I could no longer tell. I had lost that ability somewhere around the age of 14. "I am your mother," she said. "I know that. Go home." Caleb guided her toward the door. She looked back once. I held her gaze until she was the one who looked away. I stood at the entrance for 60 seconds to let the room settle, then walked back to find Denisha and finish the conversation about her daughter's first week of kindergarten. After the dinner, Marcus found me at the dessert table. "Your mother?" "Yes." "You handled that." "I just said what was true." He nodded slowly, the way Ethan used to nod when something surprised him, but confirmed something he had already suspected. The following week, on David Park's advice, I sent formal letters to my mother, my father, and Caleb. Not a legal cease and desist. A boundary letter. Clear, precise, respectful in tone, and absolute in meaning. It requested no uninvited contact at my home, my workplace, or any event associated with the fund or the studio, and stated that any attempts to involve themselves in the fund's operations would be addressed through legal channels. My father did not respond. Caleb texted, "Understood. For what it's worth, I think it is right." My mother called David's office and remained on the line for 12 minutes. David told me later she used the phrase, "After everything I have done for that girl, no fewer than 4 times." And then she stopped. For exactly 3 months, Dorothy Hargrove went completely silent. No calls, no intermediaries, no borrowed phones or forwarded messages or cousins with questions. Just silence. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon in November, she drove 3 hours through the rain. She stood on my porch. She pressed the bell 3 times. And what she said through the camera was the last thing I expected from a woman who had never once, in my entire life, admitted she was wrong about anything. I watched my mother on the doorbell camera for 4 minutes before she realized I was not going to answer. She stood in the rain with the grocery bag on the step beside her. After a while, she stopped pressing the bell and just stood there in her camel coat, looking at the door the way someone looks at a version of themselves they cannot figure out how to retrieve. Then she leaned forward toward the camera and began to speak. The way people do when they understand someone is watching but choosing not to respond. "Maya, I know you're there. I just need you to hear something." I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the counter, in the house where Ethan and I had planned a trip to Portugal, where his coffee mug was still on its hook. I had not moved it, and I was not going to. Her voice came through the small speaker stripped of its usual control. She did not sound like my mother. She sounded like a woman who had driven 3 hours in the rain because there was nothing left to manage. Caleb's business failed. He needed money. He went to your father. Baby. A pause. Your father had been sending Caleb money for 3 years without telling me. The retirement account is nearly gone. We are selling the house. I sat still. I am not telling you this, so you will help us. I want you to know that I understand things now that I did not understand before. People stopped talking to me, Maya. People I have known for 30 years. And I sat with that for months trying to figure out what I had done, and... Her voice broke at the edge of a sentence she had clearly rehearsed and then abandoned. I know what I did. I know. Then. I missed Ethan's funeral because I could not see past your brother's happiness. I could not see you. I have not been able to see you for a very long time. I am not sure I ever knew how to. And I am sorry. I pressed my hand flat against the kitchen tile the way I had pressed it against the porch step the night Ethan died, looking for something solid to hold. I believed her. I want to be honest about that. I did not think she was performing. I thought she had arrived, finally and at great cost, at something true. But belief does not require a door to open. I typed one message. I hear you. I am not ready. I may not be ready for a long time. Please go home and take care of yourself and Dad. I watched her on the camera pull the phone from her pocket. She read it. She stood still for a moment. Then she nodded once, barely, to no one. She picked up the grocery bag. She walked to her car. She did not look back. I sat on the kitchen floor for 20 more minutes. Then I got up, made coffee, and poured it into Ethan's mug before I had finished thinking. Then I poured a second cup into mine and stood at the counter in the quiet house, and let the morning be what it was. Here is what I know now, a year and a half out from that night on Abercorn Street. I had spent 36 years making myself invisible inside my own family so there would be less friction, less expectation on both sides, less disappointment to manage in all directions. I was the daughter who did not cause trouble, did not ask for money, did not need rescuing. I had mistaken that for self-sufficiency. It was not. It was disappearing. Ethan had been trying to teach me the difference for 6 years. Taking up space is not the same as being a burden. Being visible is not the same as being demanding. I had not finished learning that lesson when he died. The year after his death finished it. The Donovan Fund by the end of that year had helped 11 families in Chatham County. Bright Frame Studio had 7 full-time clients and a waitlist 3 months long. I hired an assistant named Jorge, who was 23, drew better than I did, and knew software I had never heard of. My father texted me in December. One message. I should have come to the funeral. That is the only thing I have to say. I should have been there. I saved it. I did not reply. I have not blocked his number. Caleb visits sometimes. Not as anyone's representative. Just as himself. We sit on the back porch with sweet tea and talk about things that are not our mother. He is in therapy. He is doing the slow work of becoming a person who does not need to be the favorite to feel like enough. And I am still here, still teaching, still designing, still visiting the cemetery on the 1st and 15th of every month with sunflowers, because Ethan said roses were flowers trying too hard. I am still learning what it means to stay visible. I am still, most mornings, setting out 2 mugs before I catch myself. Some mornings I pour both cups anyway, and I have stopped apologizing for that. Here is what I want you to take from this story. I did not get revenge in the way that word is usually meant. I did not go after anyone. I did not expose anyone. I did not take a single thing that was not already mine. What I did was stop making myself small for people who needed me small to feel comfortable. I built something real. I let the people who had always seen me come closer. I let the people who had never seen me face the natural, quiet consequences of that choice, without my involvement and without my anger. That is the most complete form of justice I know. Not punishment, presence. The presence you build in your own life when you stop waiting for the people who chose a party to finally choose you. If something in this story reached you, leave a comment below. Tell me if you have ever had to close a door you wish did not need to be closed. I read every single one. If you stayed until the end, you already know you belong here. Subscribe. Hit the bell. There is another story coming that will reach inside your chest and rearrange something. Stay with me. You are going to want to be here for what comes next.